Welcome everyone to another day of OMAT technician training with our new Ashtoware product that we're replacing the old Site Manager with. In a moment, we'll take a look at its navigation and some other aspects of this application and just give you a broad overview of how it works. My name is Dennis W. Fuller. I work here at GDOT as a training and development specialist. I also have Ashley Dowers, and another IT training specialist. What we want to do here, in addition to just becoming basically familiar with Ashtoware, is look at entering test results and maintaining a test queue, how to review and approve tests that you have for samples, like course samples that you might take from a site, and also how to review and approve those samples. Let's take a look at the way that you get into the Ashtoware project CBTs if you would like to take a look at those this morning and follow along with me, especially if you have a second screen, that helps. First, go into ELMS, which is on our GDOT My page. Enter your employee number and password. And then in the My Current Learning section, if you'd like to expand the list, you can go to a wider view. You should have a link, as I do here, called View All 32. And we're looking at Ashtoware Project OMAT Technician. That will be the class. Let's take a look at the actual number here, which I can put on the screen for you. The class code. There's the course number that I'm accessing this morning. I'm going to go through several sections of it, and then I will give you a look at how it's set up and how we will proceed in looking at each of the sections. And this is what the CBT looks like, but the way that you access it, once you have launched the course from the course number, and I here have a table of contents. If I click on class progress, which is a link that you just saw in the lower left corner there, it has a series of 10 CBTs that we'll be looking at that will step us through all of the aspects of Ashtoware this morning. We'll begin with the first one in just a moment, but as you finish each one, you can go back to the progress list, the class progress list, and select successive CBTs and watch along with me if you'd like. Let's begin then by going here into the navigation CBT, and you'll have a link to relaunch it if you, like myself, have viewed it before. And we look at navigating Ashtoware project. Let's look at some basic things before we get started. The screens that you see in a computer-based training are for training purposes. They may differ slightly from what you see in the actual application. And we're going to look at how to use construction of materials and support the current GDOT process. However, this isn't necessarily specific guidance on what GDOT's policies and procedures are. This is, an application actually used by several different states, but we have our own version of Ashtoware that we use here. We have available quick reference guides and other documents that you can refer to and look at how the application operates, learn more about it. As I move through this CBT, you can click the next button or use enter and hit enter, and that moves you from one slide to the next. There's also some backward and forward arrows in the screen, and I'll point those out in a moment. Some of the information screens have a scroll bar, and it only works for the steps that it is called for because this is a simulation. It's not like the actual application. Those arrows that I mentioned are down here in the frame. They're in this green bar, and you have a left and right arrow. So if I click the left arrow, it will back me up by one slide. And here you just have the copyright information about the Ashtoware project construction and materials application that we're looking at. Also, within the CBT, you're going to have some blue boxes. These give you supplementary notes and background information. Your magenta boxes provide instructions for interaction inside the CBT that when it steps you through a specific skill. And your yellow boxes are going to give you hints or error message if you've made an incorrect selection. So we'll click next, and this gives us a basic rundown of this particular CBT and the sections that we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at logging on and how to use online help, the dashboard and menu bar, understanding your role. And again, as before with the old Site Manager application, whatever role you have, whatever permissions you have within the network will drive what you actually see on the screen, what you're able to access. So we'll get more into details on that, but just keep that in mind. Whatever your role is going to make the screen look different. Also, it's much easier to move between roles in this new application. I think you'll appreciate that. We have actions menus to look at, and these menus let you perform certain tasks inside Ashtaware. We'll also look at searching and filtering lists before we look at the procedure for logging off. And this, as I said, this is basic navigation. Some of you may have seen it yesterday. We'll move through it. Ashtaware Project is a web-based software that can be accessed from web browsers like Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge. When you're working with any web-based software like this, keep in mind that you should use all of the controls inside the operational window of the application. Don't go up and start going back and forth in the browser. I'll point out some examples of where that can cause you to lose information that you may have entered. You can, at times, use the browser to refresh a screen. If it's active, you've already saved the information that you've entered there. You can refresh a screen if necessary in working with Ashtaware. Okay, so we're going to look at some of the basics now. Let's jump into, first of all, the logon process for Ashtaware Project. You will receive a website link and a username and password from GDOT when it's time for you to start using the actual application. So first, we'll take a look at the logon screen. This looks very familiar. You're familiar with the logo from Ashtaware, and we have a simple entry box for your username and password. So let's go ahead and put that in there. And then you would add your password, of course. Make sure that you are in the correct domain. In this instance, it's going to be the GDOT training domain 4.4. Of course, you'll have a live environment for day-to-day use eventually. And then you click log on, and that will bring you into the home page. And currently it has you in the project district engineer role. Let's take a look at online help. It is available both as a global help that gives you information, broad information about the application in general, but also you can look at context-specific help, and we'll look at both of those. Okay, again, we have this home page, and the role that's currently in use is the project district engineer. If you look in the upper right corner, there is the help button. And in each of the title bars for your sections, you have context-sensitive help, these question marks that you see at the end of the title bar. First, let's click Global Help. And when we do, we're brought to a different page that has basically all of the help contents available that you can search. If I click the magnifying glass search icon here, I will have a search box that, for instance, I can enter a phrase like change orders. And it will bring up any of the topic headings that have information on change orders. For instance, I can click on this first one, which they're all active links that show up in blue here. I can click on managing change orders from the search results, and you'll see on the right pane a detailed article on managing change orders. Also, as I mentioned, in each of these components, such as construction, at the end of the title bar, you have this question mark. You can click on that, and it will give you context-specific help for managing construction. In this instance, in the upper right corner, you have this title that says, click here to see this page in full context. So if you click on that, it will give you basically the same information, but it will provide you with a search pane on the left. You can also click a table of contents icon, which is going to step you through the available topics in managing construction one by one. And those are the basic two types of help that we have in Ashtaware. Now let's take a look at the dashboard and menu bar. Dashboard is the home screen for your role, and it's easy to switch between roles using this. You can click on the home button on the menu bar to return to the home page at any time. You've also got a menu bar that displays at the top of every web page in the system. And I'll point out the options within the menu bar as we look at this. The menu bar is this area at the top of every web page in the system. It has a home button, a previous button, and a My Pages button. Each of these also have drop-down menus. The arrow on the right side of each button, you can bring down the drop-down menu, and home will take you to your home page for whatever role that you're currently in. Previous will let you move back from one page to the next, and that's how you do it. Again, don't use the back and forth buttons on your browser, but use previous. Its drop-down, as we'll see in a few minutes, has a list of the sections that you visited within Ashtaware so that you can quickly move to a particular section as desired. And there's a My Pages. Basically, that's a favorites menu, just like you have in a browser. But here you can select specific pages so that you can go back to them easily as needed. And we'll also look at the procedure for that. Additionally, over here on the right side, you have an actions menu. This is like a global actions menu for the application. And an action is anytime that you want to perform some sort of change to data that you have in Ashtaware. We talked about the help just a moment ago, and log off obviously is how you leave the system and close it out. The dashboard is going to be your home screen for your particular role. Again, based on your username and login, you have certain system permissions, and you also have certain roles that are made available to you in Ashtaware. Your role is going to drive what you're able to access, what you're able to see in Ashtaware, and it may look different for one role than for the next. As I mentioned, you can always access this page by clicking on Home. Now, if we're looking here in this component for construction reference data, we have a counties link. If you click on the counties link, it will take you to that view so you can look at a list of counties and data related to them. And then if you click on your home button, it takes you right back to the dashboard where you were. The previous button, since the place we were previously was the counties view, can click on that if I need to go back to the counties view. So let's see how that works. Click on previous, it takes you to the last visited screen, which was that county overview. And clicking on the arrow there, it gives you the 10 most recent screens that you visited. You can even go to view previous activity at the bottom of this menu, and it gives you a broader list of places that you visited. Of course, if you're inside the CBT right now, these are not interacted the way they would be in the actual application. By selecting dashboard from the list of previously visited screens, it takes us back to the dashboard. And then the third component here is My Pages. We can, for instance, say select contract administration, which is one of the items underneath construction. Click on that. I can click on a specific contract, and then I decide, okay, I want to be able to access this particular contract as a favorite. I want to be able to go back to it routinely. So in My Pages, I can click on the down arrow and simply select remember this page, and underneath it, it creates a link to this contract that I'm currently looking at. So it's just that easy to set up any particular screen that you see as a favorite for quick navigation to return back to it. By clicking on the X mark here on the My Pages drop-down, you can close that. Clicking on the Home button will take you right back to your home page. Now, on many of these pages, it will have maybe a title that says on this page. It's not necessarily going to always have that. But if you see links or these blue titles above the page that you're looking at, just beneath your bar up here with Home, Previous, and My Pages, you're going to have quick links, and in this case, you've got things like external links, construction, and construction reference data. We can, for instance, click on the construction link, and it will take us directly to that component. It also appeared on the page, and which we'll see again in a moment, but this is a way of quickly navigating if you happen to have a component that's at the bottom of the screen. It will bring it up to the top of the screen for you, and you'll be able to see all of the subtopics within that component. Whenever you reach the bottom of the screen in AshToWare, it has this convenient back to top arrow. By clicking on it, it's here in the lower right corner. When you click on it, it takes you back to the top without you having to scroll back up there. Okay, at this point, I'll move user roles, and I've mentioned these a couple of times, but your user roles, again, are going to be assigned to you for the particular task that you need to perform in AshToWare. And as it says here, it's a name associated with a collection of security access rights to the information contained in system components. Your roles combine the permissions needed for several related tasks and allow you more efficient access to the parts of the system that you need. And these are designed by your agency, that's GDOT, and assigned to you by your system administrator. Depending on your agency options, you may have one or more roles, and you can switch your role at any time while working in the application. This is really convenient. Unlike the previous application that we're using, Site Manager, you don't have to log out and log back in to change roles. If it's a role that you've been assigned, it will be available to you in the drop-down menu. Let's take a closer look at this. For instance, this is still in Project District Engineer, but if you are on that home page, you can click the arrow on the home page button, and it allows you to access any role that you have the permission to access. In this case, we'll click on Materials Lab Managers, and immediately the home page jumps to the Project Materials Lab Managers page. And of course, you can see that it has different items that you can access here, different tools that you can use. If I click on the down arrow again, I can easily switch back to District Engineer. Click on that, and it brings me back to the District Engineer page, just that easily. Next, let's take a look at Actions menus, and these are functions that you can perform on data in the system. So if you have anything new that you need to add or update, you can add it into AshToWare and save it within the system. There's several things here. You have the System Actions menu. These are system level functions and processes located on the menu bar. And you'll see that here at a horizontal strip at the top of every system web page. You have component actions. These are for functions and processes that can be performed on the component level, for example, adding a new reference item. List action menus contain functions and processes that can be performed on a list, such as adding a new item to a project item list. We'll look at the specific operation of this in a moment. But finally, there are row action menus, and those have functions and processes that are performed on individual data row in the list. And again, this will become clear as we actually look at these data rows and how they function. First of all, at the top of the page in the upper right corner, we have an Actions menu, and this is for global actions. We click on that. You see that you have several available actions here, like opening process history, tracking issues, generating reports, and so forth. All of those links and actions are available to you at a global basis. You can close this menu just by clicking the X. Also, within the construction component, you can go to, for instance, a specific topic, and within that topic, contract administration overview, we have an actions menu. This is component action. So if I click on that, I can, for instance, add an item to this list. That's the function that is available to me. Click on the X to close the actions menu. Now, within this list also, you have rows, each of these representing a separate contract in this instance. At the end of each row, you've got this downward pointing arrow like a triangle. If I click on it, it will give me a set of available actions for that row. You see that there are many different tools to choose from in this instance, all which can be performed on this selected contract item. Click the X here to close the actions menu. You can also go into a specific link. If I were to click on this, it would take me into the contract view. When you go into views like this, it starts on the general page. It shows you an overview of the information, in this case for a contract. And there's a left-hand pane here with different tabs. In this case, let's click on Contract Authority, and that will take you into a section where you can look at contract authority. Sometimes these list action menus can be found inside of a tab whenever you see this triangle, which is actually a downward arrow. Click on it. You get a call-out menu that in this case lets you take the action of multi-row contract authority activity assignment. Searching and filtering lists is our next topic. You have system components with lists that let you sort and filter. It lets you find specific rows, other information you're looking for. There's a quick find search box. It's a standard component, and we'll be able to look at all the rows in the list for a specific string of text. We'll see how that works. And also, the system components contain quick find search boxes with an advanced filter, and that lets you create and save custom sorts and filters. We'll also look at how that works. So let's jump into the searching and filtering list section. We're starting here from the project sample role or system-wide admin. Notice that it's got several quick links available here, including materials, which I can click on that, and it will take me down the page to the materials component. And one of the links available is sample records. So click on sample records. It takes me into the sample record overview, and it gives you a note here that the search criteria is restricted to the objects on the overview page and the properties of that object. This is being the sample record overview. That's what we're going to see. Let's begin by entering a number for the item we're looking for in the search box. And when we enter that, it will find any item that contains that string as part of its name. One really convenient thing about the way that the sample records are managed in this Ashtaware system is that they will have the name of the person who initially set up the sample, and also it will have the year, month, day, and time all digitized for you so that each number that you see in here represents the specific time this record was created. And thus it has a unique ID string for each item. You can also use the eraser here at the end of this field. Click on the eraser, and that will clear it out so that you can enter a new character string and do a new search if you desire. If I click on System Default here, it gives me a choice of different filters. Defaulting, of course, is System Default, but it also features temporary and advanced filters. I'm going to click on Advanced, and that will take us into the Advanced Filters window. We click here on the Filters drop-down. It gives us several options, including filtering by material code. This operator says contains. There are other operators available, but we're going to leave it on contains for this example. And then we'll enter the code for a type of concrete. And we also have the ability to add an additional filter by clicking the OR drop-down here. And you see that AND is also available. We're going to choose AND as an operator. So material code contains this particular number, and you have another filter condition. And if I click on the down arrow for that, you can choose sample status. It defaults to contains, and we can specify, for instance, in testing. So we have all of that information in place. We can also choose the sort drop-down and specify that we want it to sort by created date. We can further specify that we want it to sort descending, and by checking on that checkbox, we can add that parameter. In Apply Settings, it has a Save As button or Apply Without Saving, which we'll see. And there's also a Save and Apply button as well. Note here it says an advanced filter can be named and saved for future use. And saved searches will be available from the drop-down list on the overview page. An advanced filter can also be applied without saving, and it appears temporary after applied. So you can use this apply without saving if you're interested in a once and done filter, or you can save filters. We're going to use the apply without saving for this example. And looking at the next page, you can also make this the default setting. And why would you do that? An advanced filter can be made the default setting so it's always applied every time you visit the sample record overview screen. There's also an agency-wide setting. Other users can apply the same filter. If you select this, it may be a type of filter that you want to reuse over and over again for a specific purpose. So you can set it as an agency-wide setting. We'll click Apply Without Saving. And we have a temporary filter based on the parameters that we set, and this gives us all the information according to those parameters. Okay, logging off is simple enough. That's clicking the log off button, and it tells you that you logged off the system. There are other CBTs and quick reference guides available for Ashtaware to follow some of the subjects that we've looked at. If you're running through a CBT, it has a button at the end, so click this button to acknowledge completing this training file in its entirety. And that takes us back to class progress. If I look over here to Elms, I have a link that says return to class progress. I click on that, and it will bring me to this list of the areas that we've looked at. We just finished the navigation section. We're moving to section number 2. Yours may say launch. Mine says relaunch because I have gone through this one before. But if I click on that, it will bring me to its table of contents. I can click on relaunch, and that will take me into this next CBT. And we're looking at sample records for this one. I will skip the parts that we've already looked at on the previous slide and look at this overview here about viewing and entering samples. And in this training file, we're going to look at 3 basic exercises: how to create a sample record, how to maintain sources and facilities for a sample record, and maintaining contract project items for a sample record. It mentions here, as it frequently does, that Ashtaware Project is web-based, and you can use browsers like Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge to view it. Click on Next. We're here at the dashboard again for Project Materials Lab Technicians. In the Materials component, which we have here, we're going to find sample records at the bottom. And this is a link, and if I click on that, it takes me into the sample record overview. In this title bar, I have a component action indicated by this down arrow. Looks like a triangle. Click on it. And then in the component actions menu, I can select add. To do a name search on a material code, We're going to look up a type of concrete again. And then it finds Portland Cement Type 1, which I can click on that line underneath the search. Click on that line underneath the search box and see that it inserts it as an addendum to that search. So you see that it's listed there now. Next, you have a lab reference number field, and you can enter a specific lab reference number that you want to search for. We also have a sample date field, and I'm actually going to choose a past date. This, of course, is just a demo. In the sample type field, we can click the drop-down arrow, and in this case, we're just simply going to choose acceptance. There's also an acceptance method, and for this example, we'll select sampled and tested option. Now we're going to click on the additional information tab to enter the sampler ID. And remember, when it says tabs, it's referring to these items to the left pane where it's showing you basic information on the record. So we click over here on additional information for the tab. And notice that you have a gray dot here. This indicates that you've entered information on a previous tab that is not yet saved. It isn't lost, but is there for you to continue entering additional information in other tabs. Now, this is an instance where, for instance, if you were to click your browser arrows, which you shouldn't do, you would lose your updates that you've placed on the General tab. So be careful that your actions of navigation take place inside this window. In the sampler ID name, we're going to enter Jake for the search name. And keep in mind a couple of things here in the notes too. The sampler ID field has to be populated before the sample record can be saved. And I explained the gray dot on the General tab. That means there's unsaved information stored on that tab, but it holds it for you to continue the process until you finally save your updates. So we're going to click Next. We find Jake Fleming. Click on that. It populates the field and identifies it as Jake Fleming. And now that we have the general information that we originally entered, and we also added the additional information of the sampler ID, we can click the Save button, and that saves the sample record and it creates a sample ID. The sample ID is going to be the user's first and last name, such as Jake Fleming. And when the sample was logged in the standard format, which is a 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, then 2-digit hour, minute, and second. And that's how those sample IDs are created. Now, once you've created a sample ID, you can add more information to it, but your basic information has been saved in the system. Any additional information you'll need to save. If you click the scroll bar, in the real world, you would slide it down. You can find other items that you can modify, such as the sample size field. We're just going to put 2 in here for an example. And in size units, we'll click on that. We can scroll down. We can find the size unit that we're looking for, in this case, gallon. And the represented quantity is going to be 2 for this. And we click Next. If we have represented quantity units and we have the cursor in there, we can press Enter. And it will show all of the units that match what we've entered for the sample size here. So I can select gallon from that and scroll down further. And then we have the type and remarks section. Now, it's usually the situation throughout the application that when you have a red asterisk like this, it refers to a required field. In this particular instance with the type and remark, it means that if you do enter a type of remark, you have to also fill out the other field. But these are not required in and of themselves. In the type field, in the remarks section, we can click a drop-down menu. And in this case, we're just going to put in some general remarks. And for instance, we can say that a sample is being taken to District 4, and we have both of those populated. So that satisfies the requirement if you have both of those populated. Notice that you have additional fields that you could add additional remarks if desired, or based on the type. You could choose another type and a different remark. Again, you have this handy back to top arrow in the lower right corner. You can click on that, it will take you to the top. And now that we've entered additional information beyond the basic information for the sample, we can click Save again, and notice that you have now a green bar that says Save Complete. Next, let's take a look at maintaining sources and facilities for a sample record. And it gives you an important note at the top. A sample record can be associated with one primary source and one primary facility. There's important chain of custody involved, of course, in any of these samples that we collect from a work site. So we have to know where it came from and where it's going. But you can also add more than one source or facility, which is sometimes the case. You may have more than one lab checking out a sample. We begin here by clicking on the Sources and Facilities tab, which again is one of these tabs on the left pane after you've got your information area. And then we can go to Sources Facilities, which is the fourth tab here. Click on that. And in the Primary Source Facilities section, you can click on a tab that says Select Primary Source. Right now, you see nothing's populated. Click on that, and we can look up CEMEX for this example. And it's a manufacturer with several locations, but we want to specify the particular location of Clinchfield, Georgia. When you select any of these row items inside of Ash2Ware, it's going to give you a background color and give you a green check mark indicating that this has been selected. Now we can click on Add to Sample Record, and that will populate the Sources and Facilities information page here since we have selected a primary source. We can now go to the Select Primary Facility button, click on that, and it gives us the opportunity to select from there as well. We have a facility ID that this particular plant has been given. And if we click on its row, same thing, we get the green check mark. Adds a tint to the background to show you that that row has been selected. And then you can, the same way as before, you have a button here to add it to the record. Click on Add to Sample Record. Now, when you've done this, notice that if there are any unsaved changes, it gives you this notice up here in the yellow telling you there's unsaved changes, reminding you that you have to click the Save button in order to update all of the information that you just entered. Next, we'll take a look at maintaining contract project items for a sample record. And in this exercise, you're going to associate a sample record with an item on the contract that consumed your sample's material. This association provides a record of where and how much the sample material was installed on the contract. It also lets the system count test on the sample toward material requirements on the contract. We're beginning on the sample record summary page, and this is the sample we've been working with. And again, you have a general information area, and on the left, you're going to have some tabs, including contract. Click on the contract tab, and within it, you've got a select contract project items. You click on that. We can do a search for an example by entering the number there, and we can select a specific row. When you do, a green check mark indicates that it is selected, and you can save this contract project material item and set it up with this sample record summary. Notice that it automatically saved when you went through this procedure instead of you having to click the Save button. There are several convenient functions in Ash2Ware like that, where if it's something that you need to save to the record, it lets you skip the step of having to click Save because it knows that you intend to add that particular item, so it saves it automatically. Now we can look at Expand arrow to view the associations. And the Expand arrow that's talking about this little arrow next to the word contract, so that within each of these record rows here, you've got an Expand arrow that you can click on, and it opens it up and gives you a lot of additional information that's involved here. Your project number, item, material set name, federal and state project numbers, and so forth. In the lower right corner, you have that handy back to top arrow again. Scroll all the way up, just click it. It will take you back to the top, and we still have this information successfully saved to the record. So we click Next, That is our viewing and entering samples section. Before we move on to the next one, we're going to click this button and acknowledge the training. And there are other trainings available. I'll have number 3 ready to go. So looking here at sample records, now jump over here to our overview because we've covered the preliminary notes on previous exercises. Here in the sample records CBT, we're going to have 2 exercises. One is associating a sample record with a destination lab, and the other assigning test to a sample record. First of all, associating a sample record with a specific destination lab. Notice now that the role that we're showing is the project materials lab technicians. And you have a materials component here, as well as a sample records link. And that's where we're going to begin. So under the materials component group, click on sample records, and we can search for a specific sample record in the search field. For example, I use this one, 2219. Click on next, and that will bring us into the sample ID. The sample ID listed here is an active link. You can click on it, and that will take you into the summary. Now, again, you've got your basic summary information, and on the left side, you have various tabs, including associations, which we'll click on the associations tab this time. It has a new button. We're going to click on that in a moment, but first take note of this. The note at the bottom says you cannot add or change associations for a sample record once tests have been assigned to it. So this is prior to assigning test. Create an association. So click on the new button, and we have an association type field here, which is required, as you see. Click on the drop-down arrow and select Destination Lab. Then under association value, enter DIST, that's for district office. It's not case sensitive, as you'll notice, because it brings up this list here in the system. And among those is District 4 in Tifton. So I can click on that and select it. Now I've explained the association type as Destination Lab, selected a particular destination lab, and now I get the message up here that there are unsaved changes. I click on the Save button. It changes it to green and Save Complete. And now I have associated a destination lab and a specific one furthermore with the one in Tifton. Now to assign test to a sample record, we're going to go to the sample record summary page where we just were. And in this instance, we're going to go back over to the tabs pane on the side, and you have test. By clicking on test here, you have a very similar layout. In this case, you can click on the assign test button. And this brings you into a progress bar, which will show you the samples assigned to this, or the test assigned to the sample rather. As it notes here, the tests shown in the review required test section are required for the sample and are assigned automatically. And so it shows here, since no rows found matching criteria, they're still assigned automatically. Click next through here. There's also now, since this is a progress bar set up, you have some navigational arrows within this option. If I click on the right arrow, it progresses the progress bar to the next item, which is Select Default Test. And these are assigned manually, not automatically, which means that you need to click each of them to select them. It shows you that the green check mark is posted there whenever you click C114. You can also select this other one, and the same thing happens. Both of them are now have been manually selected as test for this sample. So now we can click on the navigational arrow, and that takes us to optional test, which we can also select. Just because they appear there, as the note says, just because they appear doesn't mean they've been selected. You have to select them and associate them with this sample. After you've been through this progress bar and you've selected your default test and/or optional test, you also have the test runs here, which are defaulted to one test each. You can actually change the number of test runs that you want, which we'll see an example of that in a later CBT. If we go here to click confirm, that confirms each of the tests that you associated with that sample. As with all of these CBTs, you can click this button to acknowledge completing the training file. I believe that we can continue here with maintaining samples. When we're working with sample records, there's the ability to copy a sample record, which is something that if you use the old system, you're very familiar with. And also splitting a sample record. For instance, if you're going to do multiple test runs on a particular sample, we'll see how that actually plays out here in the CBT in just a moment. First of all, copying a sample record. Starting from the dashboard, we're going to look at how it's done. If you're creating a sample record that is similar to an existing sample record, copying the existing record can save you time, help you avoid data entry errors. Of course, you want to make sure that the sample is associated with the same job site and other identifying characteristics. We're here in the Project Materials Lab Technicians view, and we have the Materials component, and Sample Records is an available link, which we'll click on. And that takes us into the Sample Record Overview, where we can do a search. In this case, we'll use 2008 as an example. And if I hit enter or click next on there, it will bring up the sample record search results. And as you know from a previous exercise, this is a live link, so I can click on the sample ID, and it will take me into the sample record summary. On the General tab, and then I can go to the Actions drop down over here in the title bar for this sample record. And it gives me an Actions menu. Among the actions is copy. If I click on that, I'm taken to a progress bar for copying the sample record, which is a guided process. And since it is, you have the navigational arrows, such as we saw before. And this is set on copying the lab control number. You're going to link the copy with your original sample record. So this way, you have the same lab control number on both because you've selected copy lab control number. We'll click on this right arrow to progress. And the sample date in the real world would be today, most of the time. We're going to enter in a sample date here. Now that you have the sample information and sample date, the navigational arrow will take you to the next section, which is select data to copy. You have boxes here that are automatically selected, but you can also copy test if you're doing the same test on it. And it's simple. All you have to do is select that checkbox to copy over the data. Then the navigational arrow, click on that, and it takes you to the select sample record test section of this guided process. In the select sample record test section, you click this row for DOT 176. As we've seen before, it changes the background color of the row and also gives you this green check mark to indicate that it has been selected. Click on the next arrow, and you have everything completed in the process. You can now review information. by scrolling down the page. And at the bottom of this page, you will find, after you've gone through the process, you will find a confirm button. Click on that, and it saves your updates that you've entered for copying sample data. It tells you that the save is complete, and this is one of those procedures where you don't have to click the save button. It does it automatically for you and takes you back, in fact, to the sample record summary page. Sample records can also be split. You can split the sample record. A system will copy most of the sample record information from the original into the splits, but it does not copy the represented quantity field. It copies test, but not test results. And so this is a convenient way of setting up a sample that you're splitting off for additional test. You'll notice, and we'll look at this in a moment, that the split records are named by adding a hyphen and number to the end of the original sample ID. And unlike copying, splitting a sample creates a sample record group consisting of the original and all of its splits, and the system tracks their progress together. When contract acceptance actions are evaluated, no more than one of the splits in a sample record group can be counted towards material sufficiency requirements. So we're going to start from the sample record summary page again. And there we are. Again, you've got general information, but you also have the title bar up here that names the sample record and the component actions button on that title bar. Split sample record is an available task, which we will select. And in this example, we're going to create 2 additional sample records. And when that's been accepted, you can click on Split Sample Record, and it automatically saves it for you. It will return you to the sample record page of your original sample, and it's going to create 2 new sample records with IDs. One has a -1 at the end, and the other has a -2 at the end. And you can access these by clicking the OverQuick link. So let's take a look at that more closely in a moment. The Authorizes Group field is shown only on samples that have been split or are splits themselves. So you have that option. If this box is selected, you cannot authorize a sample record until all of the samples in the group have an authorizable sample status. And that's how both of those work, copying and splitting. We will be looking at receiving samples at a destination lab, which is our next section, the next item in the CBTs. We're looking at receiving samples at a destination lab, and this is just a single exercise within this CBT. We're going to start inside the materials worksheets component, and this is about reviewing list of samples, marking them received at one or more destination labs. If you're in the role of a materials lab technician, you will have the tools to perform these tasks. So we begin here at the materials worksheets component. It has a link for receiving the sample at the destination lab. So if we click on that link, we can enter a search string in the Receive at Destination Lab field, and we can go back to good old Tifton, Georgia, and select that. We do have unsaved changes, but there are going to be more parameters that we set here. For now, we're going to click on the scroll bar to go to the bottom of the page, and we're going to select the checkbox next to this last sample item. Notice it gets the green check mark. And then up here in the header, in the title bar, or header as it's sometimes called, we click on the mark as received, and then the save is complete. And once you've done this, once you've marked it as received at the destination lab, it's going to be removed from this list once it's been received, and the system confirms that your changes are saved, and in this case it does automatically save complete. By clicking on the next button, it takes you out of that. So again, we'll take a look at that. Sample at Destination Lab under Materials Worksheets. We can enter DIS, for example, as our search term. Select a specific destination lab. You can scroll down and check the sample and mark it as received. And that automatically saves it and completes that step. Okay, so that one just has one item within it. Go back to class progress, and we'll take a look at how to receive a sample at the lab unit itself. So again, you can go back to your list here, click on launch or relaunch, and that takes you into the next CBT topic. So now let's look at receiving a sample at a lab unit. And we're going to review a list of samples and mark them as received at one or more lab units for which you are designated as a lab tester and have a testing qualification for the test method on the associated sample record test. The role used to perform these tasks is the materials lab technician. Now, of course, you know that there are crush tests, abrasion tests, permeability tests to see how much water a sample will take on, and so forth. All of these various tests may be assigned to a specific sample. So let's start with the materials worksheet, and we'll see how this is done. So for materials worksheets, from that component, you have a link for receiving the sample at a lab unit. Again, we can enter a search string, and this one can be a little bit more detailed than the previous one. And in this case, we're going to look at the District 4 lab and the lab unit for soil, physical, and chemical. Click on that. We're told that there are unsaved changes, but we still have more to enter. We're going to put in part of the search string, which is the name of the sampler, in this case, Gail. Enter that. And then we'll have a list of sample IDs with that portion of the search string. If we click on the scroll bar to scroll down, we can find a specific record here and check it. And then in the component header, again, we can mark it as received. And just as before, this works the same way as far as marking it received in the lab unit. It removes that specific sample from the list, and it marks the selected sample record as received at the destination lab unit in this case, and displays a message to confirm that your changes were saved. So same basic procedure that we saw before, but in this case, we're going to the specific lab unit. As with all of these CBTs, when you complete it, you can acknowledge its completion. Then in ELMS, this link that in the lower left corner, you can click to return to class progress. And we're looking at number 7 in this case, entering test results. Now this is for entering test results. Again, it reviews some of the basics that we've looked at in the past, your role, and is going to drive what you're able to see on a given screen. This isn't necessarily about the GDOT process per se, but only about how Ash2Ware works. And we're looking at some CBTs here. There are also quick reference guides available for your review. So sample record test, and we're going to look at how these are entered. The enter test results component lists all the tests for sample records that are currently in testing or in the testing queue, and it provides a quick way to mark tests as complete when appropriate. The list is filtered to show only those sample record tests for which you are a qualified tester, but if you are an exempt tester, you will see all sample record tests. You must also be associated with a lab that is both qualified to test the material and is associated with the sample record test. Tests with a test requeued or retest status are going to be listed first. So we've got several sections here that we'll look at step by step, including entering the test results on a sample record test, selecting a reference specification for sample record test, entering test results using agency, and again, the agency's us, GDOT, views, and marking the test complete. In the note here, it mentions that not all users may have access to enter test results. The material lab technician role is going to be used in this training exercise. So again, whatever your role is drives what tools you'll be able to access. So for these, we have 4 exercises, and we'll look at each of them in succession. And again, it mentions the restrictions that are placed on accessing sample record test. Your contract authority, the lab unit and lab testers, they have to be certified for certain tests, and testing qualifications. We'll begin with the materials worksheets quick link. Now the quick links are up here at the top. They are in fact the same as scrolling down to the materials worksheets section, but the quick link is just another way of accessing those items. So if I click on that, I'm in the materials worksheets component, and I can go to enter test results as a link. You can click on the vertical scroll bar and scroll down, and we can see the different records that are listed here. In the lab unit search box, we're going back to District 4 again as an example. This is the soil physical chemical. Click on that. And in the quick find search box, we're going to enter a specific numbered record. This, of course, for an example. By clicking next, this takes us into the enter test results view, and then click the test number link right here. And that will bring us into the cement physical properties test. So this is the test number 1. And the way that we had it set up with this sample is this is for the cement physical properties. We're going to add a planned test date, a due date, and an estimated completion date. This may be completed at an earlier time than the estimate, in which case we'll see in an upcoming demonstration, the system will give it today's date. But for now, and of course we're entering some past dates as an example, we have a planned test start date, we have a due date, which we will enter, and the estimated completion date. It lets us know that there are unsaved changes and that we've entered these 3 dates in. So we need to click the Save button. And it tells us that the save is complete. If we scroll down the page by clicking here on the scroll bar, in reality, of course, you could slide it up and down. You have a test result value field, and it has different options that you can select from the down arrow. Click on that. You can select whether this particular test passed or failed from that area. Scrolling back up, and we move to the next item, which is how to select a reference specification for a sample record test. Now it has a long note here. It says, when the test is associated with sample record as a result of an action relationship with the material category, or alternate material, the Reference Specifications tab on the Sample Record Test Summary lists any reference specifications for the action relationship that were active on the date the sample was taken. Whatever associations you make with the material category, alternate material, this Reference Specifications tab is going to list any specifications for that action relationship that were active on the date the sample was taken. So keep that in mind, that this, it's very date specific. And those of you who've worked with this before understand how that works. Starting with the Reference Specifications tab. Now tabs are going to be here on the left pane after you've got an information area. On the left pane here you have your tabs. Click on Reference Specifications, and then you've got a checkbox here to use for test. Selecting Use for Test box indicates which reference specification will be used for the sample record test. Only one reference specification can be selected at a time. Click on that. And since we have specified this, it has not yet saved the change, as we know from this yellow card up here. Click on it, it turns it green, it tells us that the save is complete. And we've posted the reference specification. Next, how do you enter test results, again using GDOT specific views, agency views? The note here says GDOT uses agency views to capture test data information for some materials and test. If an agency view is associated with a sample record test, it will be available from the Actions menu on the row for the test or from the Component Actions button on the Sample Record Test Summary component for the test. Data in an agency view cannot be modified if the sample record has been authorized or if the agency view association is inactive. So keep those items in mind, and we'll take a look here at the next section. Under Sample Test Record Summary, you have, of course, your component title bar up here, and it has an Actions button. If you click on that, you have among your view options, Submit Physical Properties. Click on that one, and we're looking at the agency view summary for Submit Physical Properties. You can scroll down, and we can specify the properties for the submit. So in this instance, for normal consistency, we can enter our findings for that. And also for the autoclave, for the fault set. So far, so good. Looking here at error content, entering 13.0, when I enter that, notice that it turns the title red, indicating that this is not within specification. So instead, we're going to enter 4.5. It turns the title back to black because 4.5 is an acceptable specification. We can continue filling out the rest of the fields. Including our daily numbers. And notice that as I entered each of these daily numbers, it gave me an average and a minimum, and it can also give a maximum as well, but it kept a running total as I entered in new information. Now I can again use the back to top arrow to take me back to the top of the page. The numbers that I just entered are all in spec, and it will show me in the spec status area whether that is the case. It gives you 3 different potential messages: in spec, out of spec, or none. And since it says the results are in spec, we know that what we entered is acceptable. It does tell us at the top that there are unsaved changes, so we do need to click the Save button. And it turns green and says Save Complete when we have saved it. Now this one's a little less obvious than some of the other quick links, but you've got Sample Record Test up here. It says Sample Record Test. That's a link. So we can click on it, and we go to see the Sample Record Test Summary this way. We can scroll down to examine other items, and at the bottom we can add remarks. And if you commit to a type of remark, you have to complete it. That's why it's got red asterisk there in both of them. Here we're going to specify test result value, and what you put here in the real world might be more specific, but we're just going to put in results in spec as an example. In the additional information section, you have here at the bottom, and notice that up here at the title, additional test information, you have the test result value field, and this drop-down arrow, you can specify whether this test result passed or failed. You can select pass, use our handy back to top arrow, and it tells us that there are unsaved changes here. If we click the Save button, it turns it to green and lets us know that we have successfully saved all of those updates. So next, our fourth section here is about marking test complete. And once you've completed a test, you can mark it as complete. And when you mark it as complete, it sets the completion date to the current date. Remember, a few slides ago, I mentioned that the anticipated expected completion date, you might actually complete something earlier, in which case it will update it to the current date. And you'll see the test available in the review test worksheet. This will become clear as we take a look at it in just a moment. In the sample record test summary, we're looking at that page. There are some quick links up here. And the first one is enter test results. If I click on that, I can, for instance, select a row for a test description of cement physical properties. So if I click on that, the green check mark indicates that that one has been selected. And now this button is available, whereas it was grayed out before. Now I can click Mark Test Complete, and it automatically saves it in this instance. And notice that it removed that particular item from the list. If I click on the previous button, notice that the actual completion date has been updated. So it was completed 4 days earlier than the estimated completion date. And also the test status field indicates the test has been completed. As before, we can close out that CBT, and there are additional CBTs that we can take a look at here. Well, we're moving right along, so we're looking at maintaining test queues. Switching to overview here, and there are 3 exercises in this section, which are assigning new tests to a sample record, adding a test run to a sample record, or canceling a test run on a sample record. Once a sample record is in the system, you can cancel a test on it, but you can't delete the sample record. It has to stay there, but you can cancel it. Managers and supervisors are available. They can assign new tests to a sample record that is part of their role. So let's take a look at the first section, which is assigning new tests to a sample record. And in this instance, we'll start from our home dashboard as a project material lab supervisor. And then there's the material worksheets quick link. You've got a quick link up here. You also have a component with that. But if I click on the quick link, it takes me to the component, scrolls to the bottom of the page and shows all of the component links. So under materials worksheets, you have maintain test queue. And you have a quick find search box, which you can enter in a search string. Clicking on next, you have an actions button showing up here for the only row that match the search string. You always have these actions buttons available on a row. For this one, which is T11_G test method, we click on the actions menu. And we click on task in order to open it. And within task, we have the assign test option. So we click on that. And we're taken into one of these progress bar situations where you can see your progress on assigning a sample record. There are no required tests in this particular example, though in the real world, you might see some show up here. We're going to use the navigational arrow in this case. And that will move us into a couple of tests that are available. We can select a default test. Once it's selected, you see the green check mark. And you can select the other one as well. You can also select optional test. And once you've done that, notice that you do have the test runs defaulting to 1 for each of them, but you can increase that number. Click on the confirm button once you have everything in place. And then adding a test run to a sample record. Adding a test run lets you add test runs to an existing test on the sample record. It will duplicate the test row and increase the test number by 1, saving this change automatically. But note that this command is not available for tests that are marked as required. So we'll begin with the Maintain Test Queue screen, and this is a task for managers and supervisors because in their role they have the ability to do that. First, we're going to go to the Actions menu for the specific test method that you see here in the test method column, T27_G. So we'll go to the Actions menu, and we're going to go to Task, and for the task, we're going to add a test run, and that's all you have to do. It automatically saves it. But we're going to take a closer look at it on this horizontal scroll bar. So if we move over here to the test number column, notice that you now have 2 tests available. Test number is 2.0 for test method T27G. And since the system's duplicated the test row, increase the test number by 1 and save that change automatically. We'll see in a split test down the road that, it could do after the decimal, it may have 1 or 2 indicating the number of splits, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of things. I just want to let you know that that is a feature that will show up later. Canceling a test run, again, you can't delete the sample record, but you can cancel the test on it. And this, again, is a manager and supervisor role specific to those roles. Here we look at first, if we click on the horizontal scroll bar, and it takes us over to a specific test method, which this is the GDT61 test method. And then here's your test number. If you click on that test number link, it will open it up. And you see here in the gray bar, it says test number 1.0 test method. And description is GDT61 for insoluble residue. So this gives you all of the information that you can review. You can scroll down and look at more specifics. We can add a remark here. In this case, we're going to cancel it. And for your actual real world comment might be more detailed. But here we're just going to say test added a mistake. We can again use our back to top button instead of scrolling all the way back up. It shows us that there are unsaved changes. So we need to click the save button, and that will save the information to this point. Now we have another quick link here at the top for Maintain Test Queue. If you click on that, it will bring you into the Maintain Test Queue here for test method for the GDT61. We can select that row. And then once we move it over, and click the test status field for GDT61. And let me make sure that, and when I do click it there, it changes it to yellow. And then the test sample method, if you click it again, it's going to open it up to a drop-down menu. And you can specify test canceled. And it tells you here there are unsaved changes. Click the save button, and that updates it for you automatically. We look back on the horizontal scroll bar, it will tell you that the test was canceled. It shows you the update there for that particular test method, GDT61. Okay, close that one out. Okay, we'll move right along. So we're at section 9. Just 2 more sections to go. So now we look at how you can requeue a test, request a retest, or review a test. And again, it tells you that this is specific to the role of the materials lab supervisor. So we'll look at these. Okay, requeuing a test, we're going to start by looking in the dashboard at how that's done. And in the materials worksheets quick link, you can click on that. And again, it takes you to the materials worksheets component where we spent a lot of time today. And then you have a review test link. When you go there, review test will give you a quick find search box, and we'll enter in a sample search string that we can search for. And when it finds all of the samples with that section as part of their search string, you can go over here to the center one, which actually has the fineness of hydraulic cement item. Click on that row, and we can go to views. Here's the full title, fineness of hydraulic cement by air permeability. So if I click on that, it's going to give me GDOT specific information pertaining to our standards and specifications for this material. And notice again, you've got a quick link up here, a sample record test. If I click on that, it will take me into the sample record test summary, which I can scroll down on. I can go to a type of remark. In this case, we want to requeue. And I can go into the remark field, and I can enter please recheck. Clicking next, go back to the top. It tells me that there are unsaved changes. Clicking on the save button will save that. Now, once I've saved this item to the test record summary, I can go to review test, and I can look at the actions menu again for the fineness of hydraulic cement. And I can, this time under task, I can, in the actions menu, I can select requeue test. And I'm going to enter test results quickly, and notice that the test has been requeued. If you click on the horizontal scroll bar, notice that you have the note there under test status saying that the test has been requeued. If you want to do a retest to request one of those, note the new retest is a modifiable copy of the original sample record test. We have a materials worksheets component. We also have the quick link, which we're accustomed to using. Click on that, and it takes us to that component section, and there is a review test link there. We can again do a search on the sample string and click on the next button. It's going to find various records, and this one under test description is for the chemical analysis of cement. So we'll check that one. And when we check it, it makes available some of these previously grayed out buttons that allow us to take these actions. So I'm going to click on Request Retest, and we'll specify 1 as the number of retests that I want performed. And I'm going to specify a person who will be assigned to this retest. Clicking on the line that comes up after the search gives you the green check mark showing that this tester has been selected for this retest. Then I click Save on that, and that much information is saved. Now, Enter Test Results quick link is also available up here. If I click on Enter Test Results, it will show me that retest is the updated test status. Both of those were sort of involved. We'll move into reviewing a test in that case, and review test component is going to list tests for sample records filtered to show only those sample record tests for which you're a qualified tester, but it will show all sample record tests if you're marked as an exempt tester. So based on your role, it's going to again drive what you're able to see in the application. You have to be associated with a lab that is qualified to test the material and associated with this sample record test. So there's a lot of chain of custody record keeping associated with any of these samples. We're going to start, as we have many times, with the Materials Worksheets quick link, which takes us to the Materials Worksheets component, and we have a review test link that we can click there. We can, as we have done before, go into a specific search string to find an item that's listed. And we do find the one item, that test that we want to review. We can go to its action button And notice this particular test is described as submit physical properties. We're going to click on this action button. And then in the actions menu, you're going to find under views, submit physical properties. If you click on that, it will bring you to submit physical properties view in this instance. And this is GDOT specific information that we capture. You click on the scroll bar and that takes us down. You can view the agency information, again, GDOT specific. And further, we can click on that and scroll back up. We have the sample record test link, which will be here in the upper left corner. Click on that. And then the test information section, you can see the various information there. Click on the scroll bar, sample information, sample record remarks. Click on it further. Additional test information gives you info on that. We click on our back to top arrow. It takes us back up to the top. And in fact, we can go to the review test link again. You can select that checkbox. This is our same record as before. When we select it, it makes these buttons previously grayed out available. And we can select the one, for instance, that says Mark Test Review by Level 2. And that automatically saves and updates in this instance. We have review and authorize samples. So this is our last section. Take a look at here. And we have 5 different parts to this. Let's jump in to the overview and we'll list what they are. We'll be looking at viewing test results, viewing reference specifications, sending a test back to the lab, checking the status of a sample record, or authorizing a sample record. These are tasks that are for the materials lab manager based on that person's role. And so let's take a look at the first one, which is going to be viewing test results. We're going to start from the general dashboard for this one. As we've done many times, the link is materials worksheets. There's also a component for that, but we use the link. And in the materials worksheets component, we're going to go to review samples in this instance. We can run a search string, as we have before, looking for a specific sample. We can scroll over to find the test method C204. We'll look at its actions menu and the various views that we can take a look at, including fineness of hydraulic cement by air permeability. Click on that, and that will bring us into the agency view summary. And again, when it says agency, it's referring to things that may be specific to GDOT. Now, if we click on the previous button, we'll go right back to the queue where we were, the review samples queue. We can use the horizontal scroll bar again to find the test number column. This first one we can click on, and it shows the summary page for the selected test because it's a link and it gives you the sample record ID. And underneath it in this gray field, the test number is 1.0, the test method, and the description is the fineness of hydraulic cement by air permeability. Next, how to view reference specifications. So again, we're here at the review samples queue here. And for test method C204, we go back to its actions menu and the views. In this case, we'll look at reference specifications. And that's all you have to do. It brings it up there in the sample test record summary. Notice your reference specifications is also a tab on this test summary record. To send a test back to a lab, we'll look at the review samples view once again, and we'll go over here to the test method. You see you have submit physical properties, and we're going ahead and take the checkbox for that. And when I check that row, it will make the previously unavailable buttons available. And one of them is send test back to lab. You can click on that, and that's how you send a test back to the lab, that simply. Just simply check the row. In fact, I can back up and take a look at that again. I selected the specific row and just clicked Send Test Back to Lab. It automatically saves the request, and that's all you have to do. It sends it back to the lab and removes the sample from the Review Samples queue automatically. Just change the status of a sample record. You can set the sample record status on any of the tests attached to it, and your value will be copied to all the tests on the sample when you save your changes. You can also change the acceptance method of test. Changes can be made until the sample has been authorized. Authorizing a sample record changes it to read only, and additional changes cannot be made without unauthorizing the sample record. Important thing to note that if it's authorized, you can't change it. You can request that it be unauthorized so that you can make edits. Again, we're starting from the review samples, and you've got a test on the acceptance method column for this specific item. And if you click on it, it gives you a callout menu with different acceptance methods. In this instance, you can choose sampled and tested. And notice that it gives you this sort of coral pink. It's not quite the same yellow that we see up here where it says unsaved changes. And then you can click on sample status, and under where it currently says pending authorization, you can now click on complete. When you have those updates entered, it still tells you that these changes are unsaved. You can click on the save button and save as complete. Note that the system is going to copy the new sample status to all tests on the sample. Click on next. And then we have authorizing the sample record. Once the sample has a status of complete, approved, or void, it can be authorized. Authorization prevents further changes to the sample record information. It can be unauthorized if edits are required, as we mentioned just a moment ago. Again, we're looking at the review samples queue, and we locate this particular item on the contract row and its actions menu. We can go to task, and from task we can authorize it. Click on authorize, and of course this is driven by your role. You know, if you're a manager, supervisor who can authorize this sample. When the sample is authorized, it's removed from the review samples queue automatically. And it also automatically saves it. It shows you that the save is complete. As with all these CBTs, we can go through them in their entirety. You can acknowledge that, and it will give you credit within the system here. That's basically what we have as far as the CBTs and stepping you through the functions of Ashtaware that you might use on a daily basis. This is the technician training. We have other trainings coming up in the future. You can contact me at any time, and the best way to contact me is through my email. That's dfuller@dotgeorgia.gov, dfuller@dotgeorgia.gov. I'll be glad to address any questions about this training or other trainings that we may offer, and I appreciate your attendance today.